Hi, my name's Chandra, and today I'm making bread. Lately I've been thinking about bread similarly to how you would think about stir fries or frittatas or soup, just as a way to use stuff up that you have in your fridge or your freezer, which this time of year I'm trying to clean things out of the freezer that have been sitting in there all winter. There's not a lot left, but I do have some squash puree. And I got inspired by a recipe out of this book, which I can put the recipe I'm going to do down below because it's going to be very different from this. But I was inspired by this Sarah Owens recipe for a butternut squash and cherry bread. I don't have cherries. I do have squash. I also have leftover mixture for making orange marmalade. So this is before the pectin or anything. This was like the little bit left after you measure out how much material you need to make your jam. So I have a little bit of orange juice, essentially. And I'm gonna make some bread. So it's gonna be squash, orange, and I think I'll use raisins instead of the cherries. If I had frozen cherries, I don't have frozen cherries. If I had frozen cherries, I would reduce a little bit of the liquid and use those. This recipe calls for dried. I think I'm just gonna put raisins and I think that'll be fine. So let's get started throwing everything into this bowl. First, I want to get all of my liquids mixed together. I don't know how much starter left, so I'm just going to use the rest of it, and then I'll feed this little bit. I hardly ever measure starter. I just kind of use what makes sense. I don't, this is very old, so not very old, it's maybe a week or two old. It's been in the refrigerator. I just took it right out. I'm gonna use it from that. And I will just maybe need a longer ferment, but that's fine. I'm gonna use the recipe just for flour amounts and like the amount of honey and things like this. This honey is pretty hard. I wonder if I should warm this up a little bit. I will. I guess I didn't tell you how much starter that was. I would guess half a cup. All right, I'll make that pourable. Now let's see how much of this we have. And what I'm gonna do is I have about the same amount of squash as recipe, a little bit more. So I'm gonna take this measurement out of the water amount and maybe do even a little less water because I have a little bit more squash. My starter is probably a little more liquidy than hers. This has actual pieces of orange in it, so that'll be fun in the bread. This is not warm water. Recipes will call for a certain temperature of water with bread, but that I believe is just so the recipe can say, let it sit for this long. And I just know to let it sit for as long as it needs to sit. So we need altogether, okay, so I'm going to add 415 grams of liquid. And then once I get this bread autolyzed, so it'll have a little rest after I add the flour and before I add the salt. When I see what that texture is like, once the flour has time to absorb all the water, I will add more water if I think I need it. Let's see if our honey is ready. Yeah. Good. All right. What other liquids do I have? Oh, my puree. All the orange things. I wish I had cherries. I like those better than raisins. I do like the idea of having something in there. And I don't think I have anything else. Okay, all we have left is our dry ingredients. Okay, here I have freshly ground wheat flour and rye flour, and I'm going to put all this down below, what I did. Add that. going to use all-purpose flour, and I need 525 grams. I won't add the salt until after this has had a rest, the flour to absorb fully all the liquids. And that is when I can add more water if it looks like it needs it. I'll probably add a splash of water just to help mix the salt in. Unless this ends up being too wet of a dough, but I don't think that will be the case. It's beautiful. I'll show you in a minute here. It's getting nice and orange. Smells like flour. I've definitely had some fails with using bread like a receiver for anything I find in my freezer. But this one I think is pretty foolproof. This looks good. Right now it's a pretty stiff dough, which I don't mind. Oh, I can see the little chunks of orange. And since that was marmalade, there's the orange peel in there too, which is going to be really pretty, I think. Fold in the raisins after the salt. Here is what we have right now. So you can see the bits of, that's probably a bit of squash, there's a bit of orange. I'm gonna let this rest for about half an hour and then we'll get back to it. I ended up finding some apricots, and I liked the sound of apricots better with the squash and the orange than raisins. So I'm going to cut these up a little smaller and add them into my dough that already has its salt, and I'll just fold these right in. I always get my hands just a little wet before I stretch and fold my dough, and that way I'm not sticking to it quite so much. I'm not going to bother telling you how many times I do this because I just do it whenever I walk by. It varies incredibly, but I usually leave at least a half an hour in between stretches. Here I'm getting my surface ready to dump out my dough. I'm just adding a little bit of water and spreading it around, and then I can get this out and it will not stick to the counter quite as much. I want to divide this into 2 pieces. I usually always make a double batch at a time and freeze one or both. So I'm just going to gently shape these into rounds, let them rest for a few minutes while I get my Benetton baskets ready, and then I'll do another shaping and they will go into the refrigerator overnight. It's the next morning and I've had my oven preheating with my Dutch ovens inside for at least half an hour at 500. Once I put these in, I'll lower the temperature right away to 470 degrees, and this is with the lid on. And I'll bake for 20 minutes, then remove the lids and bake for 15 more minutes. I love the color of these. They are so pretty. I like the dark edges on the top of the loaf, and the orange color is beautiful. The spread was sweet and I enjoyed it.